Earlier this year, Crime World released a podcast series called Caught in the Crossfire about the murders of Anthony Campbell and Martin Marlowe Hyland. And during the making of the series, I sat down with the former head of the Garda Serious Crime review team, Christy Mangan, to discuss the ins and outs of the department dubbed the Cold Case Unit. Now, what you heard throughout the series were snippets of that interview, but as a bonus, we're releasing the full conversation so you can hear Christy's full, unabridged account of how Gardai work to solve cold cases. You can listen to the full series now, wherever you get your podcasts. Do you want to start with the Matrix thing?
Yes, the Serious Crime Review Team, which I suppose is commonly known as the Garda Cold Case Unit, was established in 2007 by the then Garda Commissioner. I had been sent in 2005 to the UK to train in the concept of cold case reviewing. So upon completion of that course, I recommended to the Garda Commissioner that the Guards as an organisation should introduce this concept. It wasn't a new concept. It was used huge. It is used hugely in the US, where there are a lot of cold case squads over there, very successful units, and then it's really embedded in the UK since the Stephen Lawrence inquiry. And their learnings from the failures that took place in that murder investigation. So we also looked at what the PSNI were doing. They had the historical inquiries team up there. We met with them. We also went to Edinburgh. We met up with the Scottish forces and down to the London Met. And I suppose one of the units that we thought, well, I certainly thought was very, very progressive was the review team that was based in Cardiff. And we, over the years, we had huge positive interactions with that unit because they obviously have had a lot of success since they were set up. We also contacted the FBI, and they came over here to Ireland in 2008. They spent a week with us, training the unit up in crime scene assessment, the ritualistic and signature behaviours in modus operandis, intimate partners, homicides, serial homicides, sexual homicides, and then also they devised suspect interview strategies that we could use in tandem with the new Garda interviewing model that was been brought in at the time. So the startup period was very interesting because all of the units we dealt with were very frank. They went through not always their successes, but also the failures of the different police forces all over the world. And unfortunately, the mistakes are quite similar. So we decided that we would take the policies and procedures that they used in all of these police organisations, and we would take the best out of them, what we consider to be the best. And then we devised a policy for the guards because we would have to have a policy in case we were going to experience pushback from certain investigators. So the unit was established in August 2007. And then we started off basically trawling through files, databases where they existed to try and get a handle on how many unsolved homicides actually existed within the country. So we picked a cutoff point from 1980, but and that's simply because we had to pick some decade. But we went back and over the time that I was involved in the Serious Crime Review Team, we went back and looked at homicides. The oldest one I was involved in was the investigation into the murder of Cecilia McAvoy in 1962. She was a young 18-year-old girl who was found murdered on the Heath in Portlaoise. So that was one of the oldest that we looked at actually. So we then started with our start-off point in 1980, looking at the unsolved homicides. And our job was to have a preliminary examination of each of the cases, because we needed to establish what had we got. Did we have? We set up what's called a weighting matrix, and that was applied in determining the prioritization of the cases for review. So if the case had fingerprint evidence, if it had DNA evidence, or maybe new witnesses were coming forward, and also that the complete investigation case papers were available and the exhibits, then it was a prime case for a review. Also, if there was new forensic opportunities or developments in science, or if we discovered that there was significant actions not taken at a particular time for whatever reason, we would follow up on them. But unfortunately, then on the lower scale, if there was no new information or evidence, and no intelligence, no new forensic opportunities, or unfortunately, if the suspect was dead, or significant witnesses to the crime, or people who had vital information, and if they were deceased, or there was no case papers or no exhibits, well then unfortunately the case then was listed on a very low priority. And that's the way it has to be, unfortunately, because, if you're going reviewing a case and putting huge amount of resources into the matter, and the suspect is dead, well, a lot of people would question, your usage of resources. So that's what we did. We identified, over in excess of 200 murders that had not been resolved for a variety of reasons. And then we started looking at some of the cases where we thought there would be a good chance of success initially. And then during that period of time, a lot of people contacted the office. They would actually email you, or maybe even wait outside the office for you, in the hope that they catch you coming or going. Retired members were absolutely brilliant. We had a lot of retired members contacted us, and some of them, they really just had a bee in their bonnet about a certain case. It wouldn't leave their mindset, and weren't satisfied with maybe the way the investigation panned out, maybe 20 years, 30 years prior to where it had been set up. So they wanted to tell us what they thought. And sometimes you would meet maybe some people who were very irate, very, very annoyed with the Garda organisation. Maybe they felt they had been treated badly, or felt the case hadn't been progressed to the standard it should have been. And basically that they hadn't been listened to. That's, that they had a voice and they wanted somebody to listen to them. So often you would meet maybe with families, you certainly would meet with all the retired members, and the first maybe 45 minutes, hour is you will get pummeled, because you're representing the Garda organisation. It's not personal, certainly not personal, but it's they're venting, and you have to take it. It comes. It's a verbal assault from some people, because you're the one wearing the Garda badge, and they want action, and they want to know why you haven't taken action, or why the organisation didn't take action, and a lot of the families would have believed that the case had been forgotten about, and that it actually had gone cold, and nothing had happened in the intervening 10, 20 years, or whatever period of time had elapsed. So it was important to listen to what the families had to say, including the very poor commentary they had about the Garda organisation. But then there was a lot of positives coming from the families, in that they had ideas themselves as regards who was involved in the murder, and maybe what could be done, or maybe there were people that they believed in the intervening years hadn't come forward. But then, because of change of their circumstances, they may have got married, had children, or they may be facing death themselves, they may be unwell. And we met with a number of people as a result of that, because they wanted to literally unburden themselves as to what they knew about a particular case. So we got huge buy-in from the public. We recognised from the very start that the media were of huge importance to us, and how we would utilise the services of the media in order, maybe from time to time, to highlight a case. So you would have to develop a number of strategies. source the original case papers. That's the very, very important thing to do. See what exhibits are there, or unfortunately, what exhibits are not there, and how critical or how important are they in a case to the success maybe of getting to a prosecution. It could be a gun, it could be a knife, it could be maybe rope that was used in the murder. And then also looking at, is our suspect alive? Thankfully, in the majority, the suspects were alive, but unfortunately there were 2 cases that we would have examined, and unfortunately Rita Ponsford was one of them. When we went looking for her husband in the UK, he had died 2 weeks before we got there.
Right, yeah.
So time is of the essence, but the cold case review is more proactive than if you're dealing with a murder inquiry. You're very reactive. It's a very reactive situation. Also, the investigators at the time then would have been dealing with maybe multiple cases, multiple murders, and their staffing levels was very poor. Their resources were poor. So you would listen to the original. I would have always endeavoured to go out and interview the original senior investigating officer and get a good feeling for what they thought had gone well and maybe not gone so well. So you met some interesting characters, some very, very strong-willed people who simply, it was their way or no way, and they didn't believe maybe a review should take place. And even some serving members were not pro the concept of reviewing, because they felt as if it was me or the Garda organisation coming out maybe years later and marking their case and maybe being critical. And that's not the purpose of a review. The purpose of a review is to bring a case to a resolution. And, we're all, you're experienced enough. If somebody's saying, well, maybe, did you look at maybe such an angle, maybe it wasn't in existence. So you're not judging the person's work with hindsight. Mm-hmm. That's the main thing. You can't put people into corners.
And how cold would a case have to be? You set up, was it 2007 you said, or
2007.
You set up in 2007. So, was there a cut-off point, how far back you looked? Did you look back 5 years, 10 years, or?
No, we went back as far as 1980.
But from, say, 2007, you were hardly looking at murders in 2006 that were still actively being investigated.
No, but we did eventually in 2010 and 11, we started looking at cases that happened in 2005. Irene White would be one case in particular. There's 2 people serving life imprisonment now for Irene's murder. So
I think I was talking to a journalist from Canada who said that in Canada, it automatically goes to review if it hasn't been solved after a certain amount of years. He might have said 5 or 6 or something.
Even less. You actually can review a murder investigation as it's going along.
Right.
So let's say a murder takes place in January of this year, whatever part of the country, and it hasn't got a clear suspect. It just is not moving the way, most murder cases move very, very quickly, and somebody is charged within a short period of time. We see that all the time. But some just do, unfortunately, run aground. Mm. And that's, in the UK, they carry out 28-day reviews. So within 28 days, they have a review team in there just to make sure that there's no tunnel vision, that people aren't following a particular line of inquiry and using a lot of resources in the mistaken belief that Mr. A is the suspect, when there are a large number of other suspects who haven't been cleared, that haven't been traced, interviewed or eliminated from the inquiry. So the review can give a good health check to an investigation at a very, very early stage. So I've been involved in reviews of murders. One very, very major murder investigation, we were, the Serious Crime Review team were involved within a month to 6 weeks. We were in assisting, and there was a person serving life imprisonment for that case. So the decision to bring it in is very critical. There has to be a very open mind for investigators to say, okay, we're not moving with the speed we thought we would. Maybe we should get a third eye to come in here and have a look. And you have to be big enough to say, right, okay, maybe somebody else can see something different.
Yeah.
And sometimes they don't, sometimes they do. And that's what the cold case review can do. So you can go in at a very, very early stage to conduct a review of the case to see where he's going at a particular time and make sure that is on very firm foundations. Because if somebody's not arrested and charged within a reasonable period of time, or it doesn't appear the investigation is going anywhere, unfortunately, they're the cases that remain unsolved for many years.
Mm. So if there was a dictionary description of what a cold case is, in layman's terms, is it something that's run aground?
It's a case that has remained unsolved.
Mm.
And even
that can be something that happens within a month or something that can happen within 40, 50 years.
Yes. Yeah. It can be, you can review any case.
Mm.
You can, but the advice and experience would tell you that you will be reviewing cases where you have a reasonable chance of success. If the suspect is dead, well, unfortunately, it's going to be impossible to bring somebody to justice. But having said that, we reviewed cases where suspects were dead. During the review, we found out, but we were able to go back and sit down with the family and say, unfortunately, the suspect in this case, whom we believe killed your loved one, is dead. But now we can explain to you exactly what happened in the last moments of their life. We can sit down and tell them exactly what happened because we have the case papers. And it's a matter of being frank with the person. Let them know what has happened to their loved one, because if you're not explaining it to the person or telling the person, well, then they're starting to look at you with a jaundiced eye and they think, well, is he telling me the truth? Why hasn't he answered my question? I asked him that question maybe a month ago and he still hasn't given me the answer. He's dodging the question or whatever. So it's a matter of being very, very honest with the people and saying, and tell them out straight, this is as far as we can go with it.
Very difficult conversation to have. Like, do you sugarcoat it, or
I wouldn't. No, I wouldn't. But I'd be always careful of the sensitivities with a person. Sometimes some of the graphic details of a person's death, is that going to do any good to his wife or her husband, or maybe it was a child? So you shouldn't be going into maybe some of the terrible, terrible graphic details.
You probably look for a positive, like they didn't live very long or they died quickly, or those kind of things that can bring comfort. Yeah,
and it can bring a lot of comfort, and explaining to them the process of an investigation, how it actually maneuvers, how it's conducted, because thankfully the majority of people in this country have no contact with the guards, none, bar maybe a bit of speeding or maybe something, they were stopped at a checkpoint, but they don't have big interactions with the guards, and nobody needs to have that. But when your loved one is murdered, you get the phone call, then your whole life, because I've seen people, you meet them within an hour of a murder, and they're arriving at the hospital, the person is actually dead in the hospital, and you have to go out and you have to explain to them that their son or daughter has been murdered, and then they're absolutely collapsing in front of you. And then you're trying to, comfort them as best you can. Also, then you have to have your investigation up on a firm footing. And then sometimes it can be very difficult with some murder investigations in that the suspect is within the family unit. It could be another member of the family. So you have to be careful what information you're imparting, because people generally talk when they hear something of a confidential nature, unfortunately. So the family liaison officers are very, very important in that. The decision to open the review is a traumatic moment for the family, because a lot of families would have told me, why are you doing this? We got nowhere 20 years ago. You're bringing it all back up again, particularly if you decide in the review that maybe an exhumation should take place. And that is very, very traumatic for the family and the local community, extremely so. There are huge sensitivities which you have to manage, and you have to be very careful with them. But you also have to be very honest with the family. Because if the family believe that you're maybe over sugarcoating it, and that you're, not telling them the truth, they'll soon call you out.
Mm.
And then maybe the relationship starts to strain. It might turn against you, and maybe you would end up the same as the original investigators. You're the enemy. And then some investigations, you might have maybe a strong local, maybe representative, a politician or whatever, who maybe champion the family. And you have to deal with all of those issues as well. So it's important in any your dealings with the family that you're there to tell them the facts.
Yeah. And give them, I suppose, a realistic view on whether it can be solved or not and how long it will take, because these things take a long time.
The murder investigation could have taken 6 months. And unfortunately then the review then could take maybe 12 months, 2 years. Because maybe longer, because of the fact you're trying to source all the exhibits, all the case papers, all the witnesses, trying to see if they're all there still. You're trying to develop new opportunities, and then you also have a huge workload yourself. You have a number of other reviews that require your attention as well. So it is a very busy day in the life of anybody involved in the Garda Cold Case Unit. They're extremely busy from dawn to dusk, and that's a fact of life. But having said that, all investigators are busy. It's just the Cold Case Unit gets the opportunity to prioritise certain cases and put their efforts into them.
There must be an extra level of satisfaction to bring somebody before the courts, or, indeed to solve one of these cases. A lot of murders happen, and very quickly there's a suspect identified, arrested, charged before the courts. But in cases where, families have been left without answers for 10, 20 years, it must be amazing to be able to do that for them.
Yeah, it is. There's a huge level of job satisfaction for you in those cases, because maybe the file had lain in a detective store maybe for 20 years or is in the Garda repository, and nobody was looking at it because they're busy doing everything else. So then when you get to a point with, say, a case, and we had last year Noah Sheehan, which the Serious Crime Review team had an input into, and you have a person gone to jail for life. Also Nancy Smith, that's another case. So there is huge satisfaction, job satisfaction, not only for yourself but also for the local investigators, because when the guards conduct a review, we make a large number of recommendations of actions they should take in order to progress the case. So it's a matter of, you have to go back down and sit down with the investigators, and they are busy, so you're giving them a lot more work to do. But, in all of those cases, the case goes back to the local detectives, in Cork or in Kilkenny, and they put huge amount of resources in themselves. They really put their shoulder to the wheel. And they bring it then to the DPP, and the DPP then, thankfully in those cases, decided to prosecute, and then ultimately results in families getting, what they say is justice. That's what they're getting. And you can see the huge weight lifted off whatever family members are left. So there's massive satisfaction from them. And then there's also a huge commentary from the public, because the public like to see it too. They like to see that these people are not let live within our communities, and unfortunately go on to commit many, many more serious offences. Some people do, who evaded justice for maybe a murder 30 years ago. We have found that they have been involved in a lot of other cases. So there's huge satisfaction for a lot of people when a case is brought to a resolution.
So to focus, I suppose, on Anthony Campbell's murder, and his mum, Christine, she believes she knows who killed her son. She was told very early on the two names that you and I both know. She was pretty much told how it happened. The Eamon the Don Dunn drove the car, and the two hitmen got out and went in and killed her son, as they didn't want anybody remaining that could be a witness to any future court cases they might have been involved in. You can see why that's very frustrating for her, that these people are still out there and they've never been charged with her son's death.
look, it has to be extremely frustrating. I can't place myself in the shoes, unfortunately, but you can understand the frustration and how, she wants to keep the case up in the public's eye, and she also wants to make sure that Garda Síochána should be doing what they should do. It is a case, no doubt, that could be reviewed. We have all seen the media reports about speculation as to who is involved from the very start, and there's at least 2 of those people around. So it is a case that could be reviewed. It would depend probably on how many cases the Serious Crime Review team are engaged with at the moment. But what I always say to families are, request a meeting.
Yeah.
Look, come, we'll talk. We'll sit down, we'll have a cup of tea, cup of coffee. You tell me what you think. I'll tell you what I think. If I'm in a position to take the case on, then I would be giving you a rough estimate of how long it will take me to get to the case. But that's what's important, and it's important for people to talk, because it can be frustrating for, let's say, the injured parties, the deceased's family, to think that nothing happening. And then it can be frustrating maybe for a police organisation to see a lot of commentary in the newspaper about a case. So what my learning from all of the reviews I was involved in is seek a meeting. Seek a meeting with the powers that be.
So Christine Campbell asks why there can't be a cold case review. Are you saying that it's kind of up to her to push it?
Well,
is that
no? To be fair, it's no. It's not for the mother.
Yeah.
No, it's not for the mum to be pushing. But it certainly is no harm that the case is highlighted, and rightly highlighted. Ultimately, 2 people lost their lives there that day. One was involved in the activities that were involved, and the other young person was trying to live their life. Anthony, he was doing his work. I've read a lot of articles that his mother has contributed to, and they're very, very emotional. If he was alive now, would he have children? What would he be doing? Would he'd have a partner? You have grandchildren. So I think it's important that people, talk to each other. The Serious Crime Review team may have had a preliminary examination of it. I don't know. But it's important that both sides would meet and to see what could be gained from having a full review of the case. Because it's positive that the 2 suspects are still alive. That's always very, very positive. And then you could move it on. I'm not aware of what exhibits are in existence, or is there DNA? And then there's always the possibility of somebody coming forward to talk.
Yeah.
And that's what these people have to worry about. They have to be very concerned that people they were involved with in many, many other things may talk during Garda Síochána, and that does happen. And it happens on a regular basis.
And it's very practical advice you're giving, and to other people listening as well, that, set up a meeting and go. Because I think a lot of the time, victims' families, because they don't understand, A, the media, and B, the workings of the Garda Síochána. As you say, they don't usually have to deal with either of our trades as
Thankfully.
such. Yeah. But I think sometimes during an interview, they will say, I would like, and the commissioner nowadays is Drew Harris, I'd like Drew Harris to look at this case. And then nothing happens. But it's almost as if people believe that to be the official call for the case to be reviewed, when in actual fact, what you're saying is people need to write to the Serious Crime Review team and set up a meeting directly with them.
Yeah.
And that's an official sort of request, isn't it?
It is. To be fair to the Garda Commissioner's Office and to the Serious Crime Review team and all investigators, they, number one, don't always be looking at the media.
Exactly.
They're not reading all of the different articles unless somebody brings it to their attention. So officially seek a meeting. Sit down. I would always also say to a family, document the concerns you have. Everything that's eating away at you, matters that you think weren't attended to, let it be. You might think maybe that somebody wasn't interviewed or some information has come to you. And then come in with your list. And that's as basic as it is. I would have sat down with Anne Dilcasson, that's Irene White's sister, who was a brilliant advocate for, the investigation of domestic murders and of her sister's murder. And Irene would come in with a list almost every time I met her. And she would ask me questions, and she would put me to the pin of my collar as well. Absolutely. And I give huge credit to Anne. Unfortunately, she passed away, but what a brilliant person, because she kept championing the case. She kept saying, you need to review this case. You need to do something about this case. And as a result of her determination, and it's solely down to her and her partner at the time, that the case was reviewed. She actually kept at me, sent me emails, Christy.
She had you on speed dial.
She had me on speed dial, and fair play to her. She waited outside the Serious Crime Review Team offices with a bag of scones and butter and jam and says, Christy, you make the tea. We're going to meet now. We're going to talk. And she was a very, very forceful, brilliant person. And sometimes the families don't have a person like that. Maybe they do other times. Or maybe they might get a solicitor who is adept at, negotiating their ways around the way the guards operate. So it is important that the family has somebody who is in a position to speak for their deceased loved one, because they need a voice in the whole judicial process. And if the case has been unsolved, from 2005 to 2006, whatever year we're talking about, for a variety of cases, then who's actually putting that case on the table in front of a senior investigating officer? Nobody is, unless somebody says, listen here, you need to look at this case.
Yeah, and I think sometimes there's a blurring of lines, totally understandably, with people who've been traumatised by murder. And I mean, in this case, it's a mother who's lost her only child, and the layers that go with that. But there is a blurring that sometimes the media and the guards all, merge into one in their minds, and they believe it takes them a lot to do an interview. I mean, you go and you interview somebody, and they'll tell you they were awake all night. They could be awake for 3 nights because they know they have to go through all this. They have to bring it all back up. And it's such a massive thing for them to do. A story goes out in a newspaper or in a documentary, whatever it is, and nothing happens. And I think there's a huge amount of disappointment that goes with that then. And defeatism almost, well, I did all that and nothing happened. But this is a practical route, maybe, that is an option for many people. We'll have the Serious Crime Review Team will be inundated with people looking for meetings. But it is it's a more controlled, maybe, route to take. It's
a more controlled, informed route, rather than playing out everything in the public domain. It's where you go to the person's house, or you might decide to meet at a sort of neutral venue, maybe a hotel. Some people just simply don't want to go near a Garda station. So I would always make the offer as to where do you want to meet? And, I've met with, people, who are involved with terrorism, but they want the murder of their loved one investigated. So you literally, you go to a hotel or you go to their home and you sit and you listen. The important thing is to listen. You listen to everything that's been said, and you listen to how aggrieved the family are. It's bad enough, terrible, somebody has lost their life. But then if the family believe that it's due to the incompetence of the investigators, or for some other reason, maybe a witness recanted their statement, and the family believe maybe if there was another approach, maybe, or a different approach made, that you might get that person back on board. So it's only by listening to the family, and I can't overemphasize the listening part. It's an active listening part, not in one ear and out the other ear and gone off up the road in the patrol car. It's a sit down, take maybe 3, 4, 5 hours, whatever it takes, and maybe you have to come back again. So you sit there, and you listen to what the family have to say, then you tell them what you can do, if you can do anything. You tell them out straight. And then always arrange your meetings. Go back and speak with the parent. If you said you'd be there at 7 o'clock this evening, be there at 7 o'clock. Don't cancel the meeting at the last minute. Because as you said, that family member maybe didn't sleep for a week. Maybe they're up the wall because you're coming back and they're wondering what information you have or you haven't. Have you maybe got something? So they're hanging on every word you say. That's the way it is. And it's also maybe calm the whole situation down.
You're building a trust, aren't you, really?
You're building huge trust. But with that trust goes a lot of responsibility. You have built a trust with the family. So there's no point in re-traumatizing them by not doing what you said you would do.
I just, whenever I look at this case, I can't. And we talk about the possibility or why there cannot be a cold case review, would it help, etc. Can Anthony Campbell's murder be investigated separate to Marlow Hyland's murder? Or do they both? They died together, they were murdered together. Are they forever sort of linked?
Well, they are forever linked. It's the one crime scene. It's the same people involved, same getaway driver. It's a double murder investigation with two families.
Yeah.
So it would be if you gleaned enough evidence in relation to the case, it would be a murder charge for two people.
And it's fair to say, maybe while every human being has a family and people who love them and people who miss them, Marlow Hyland made choices of the world he existed in. And he probably realised that, some of the gains he made, mainly financially, could have come with the cost of losing his life. He knew that one day there could have been a bullet somewhere with his name on it, and that is likelihood of how he might die because of the life he chose to live. Anthony Campbell was a complete innocent. He was on a road to probably a bright future. He had an apprenticeship. He was starting a career. He had a loving mother and father and, extended family. And he was a boy really on the brink of manhood. It feels as if he should be treated differently, or, it feels unfair that they're both linked in such a way and that they would both benefit perhaps or from the same justice.
The whole case is an absolute tragedy. But as an investigator, you have to be mindful of the fact that Marlow Hyland had a family as well. He has left behind people who are traumatised, people who no doubt want justice as well. So your approach is it's a murder of two people. Okay, the circumstances of both people are poles apart. Absolutely. One made a choice to become involved in criminality. The other was just trying to make their way in life, as an enormous amount of young people do. So as an investigator, you're there to deal with the facts, to deal with the situation you have in front of you, and not to make judgments about either parties. You may have your own private views, and the courts eventually will dispense justice and might make a commentary in relation to it. But as a professional investigator, a detective, you have to go in there with the mindset is you are dealing with the death of two people. Two people had their lives taken from them. And no matter what anybody is involved in, it doesn't give the right to another person to dispense their type of justice. Otherwise, we'll just have anarchy on the streets and people will do what they wish. And, the streets will be very unsafe with people carrying their firearms. So it's a sensitive situation, very, very sensitive. That's why it's so important to listen to what Christine has to say.
Yeah.
Very, very important. Listen to everything she has to say. And, we would, as the review team, you document every issue. So that when you're going back for a final meeting, what I would have done is I would have made sure that I've addressed every issue that has been raised. And I'd have a reason for everything that I've done. And if I couldn't deal with a certain issue, I would tell them out straight. I haven't got an answer for this. but I have an answer for the other 140 queries. This one I can't answer, but I endeavoured to try and, number one, solve the case. Number two, answer everything that you've asked me to answer. And like I dealt with one lady, her husband had been shot dead, and in the intervening period, she told me she had little or no contact with the guards. And when I told her that over 10 people had been arrested for the murder, she was shocked because nobody told her. She never knew. Mm. So unfortunate breakdown in contact does happen. What you do have is, members retire. Maybe, unfortunately, some are dead. And then who's there to look back to 20 odd years ago? And that is an unfortunate fact of life. Mm. And then investigators, they're busy dealing with the current case they have. And sometimes, it's difficult to allocate resources to go back. But in this case, I would definitely be recommending that contact is made with the Serious Crime Review team. They have a very, very good unit. They have a very, very good approach with victims' families. Really, really good, sensitive way of dealing with matters. And I've no doubt, that they will listen to what she has to say, because somebody has to listen to what she has to say.
And I suppose finally, we don't have the files in front of us about this double murder, but we know sort of the practicalities of it. We know that it happened within a house. We know that two individuals went into that house. They talk about you leaving your DNA everywhere you go. So we can assume perhaps that there has been some forensic gathered there. There seems to have been some witnesses to the car and some witnesses to the individuals that were there. There's obviously ballistics opportunities, and the two suspects are alive, and we know both continued a career in criminality. What's it looking like to you without having the actual files as regards your matrix?
Yes, I obviously I don't have the file, but if I was sitting in front of Christine now, we would have spent many hours talking. Number one, I would want to get to know him. What was he like as a child? And it gets, a sense of who Anthony was. It's very important to know who the victim was. What was it like as a child, growing up and then going into the plumbing business and working hard on an easy profession. And then, working long hours. And then I'd get an understanding from her as to how it had devastated the family. And then I would have had a very good read of the file before I met her. And that certainly would influence my thoughts. But she would be a huge influence on me as well, because, it's when you're looking in somebody's eye and they're sitting literally 2 meters away from you and they're asking you to please help them on their journey. Me personally, yes, I would review it. I would. Because, there's an enormous amount of hurt here. An enormous amount of hurt. And with the positives that are there, and, as you say, we don't have case papers in front of us. But from that intervening period to today in 2024, there's a good possibility of other people knowing what took place and why it took place and why Anthony was shot and where they went afterwards, how they got rid of the firearm, how they got rid of the stolen car or the transport that was used. So there's every likelihood they spoke to other people. It's very hard to contain killing somebody within your mind. And I've met a lot of people who were involved in murders and sat literally the distance we're sitting apart, and you can see the pain in them. They're not nice people, but you can see the pain in them and how it has absolutely devastated their lives because of the actions they took. But they decided to go into that house and kill two people. So it does have a massive effect on them, but nothing compared to the effect it has had on Anthony's family. and the utter devastation they were left to deal with. So, An Garda Síochána has a duty to the public. It is a duty to victims' families. And I certainly really, really would like to see this case reviewed. And hopefully it would bring a resolution for the family, which ultimately would be a prosecution against the people involved.
There's one other thing I didn't want to, just ask you about it. She told us, this was what really got me now. There was the bullet went through his hand.
So he's defending himself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would that do anything for any of an investigation? Do you know what I mean? Like what you're talking about there, that sometimes killers feel remorse.
That would be something that I would script into the public domain eventually.
Yeah.
Eventually. If you were doing maybe, let's say, an appeal.
Yeah.
You have a good background to Anthony. Very soft, has to be very soft. And then while he was protecting himself, he was shot.
Yeah.
And that, you'd never know. You never know who's, and to say, all right, I've had enough of this.
Yeah, you see, that's what I thought. I just, one of those things that really gets you. I just visualised it, that doesn't it show his nature?
Yeah. Well, the first thing you would do is endeavour to locate the case papers. That's what's of huge importance. The fact that the case is not that old of a case would mean that the case papers would be secure. And then you would examine the papers, see what exhibits are listed, compare them then to the exhibits that you source from the original investigators. This was over in Finglas. So you would literally go to the exhibits room, sit down, do an inventory of what you have, and then more importantly, sometimes of what you don't have. You also then would go and meet with the original senior investigating officer and the team, if they're willing to meet with you. So that would mean maybe emailing, calling. I invariably rather contacted somebody by phone or meet them in person. It's more difficult to tell somebody no when you meet them in person. So meet them, sit down with them, listen to them intently as to what they think happened. Because obviously what happened, but what happened during the investigation. And maybe what reasons were there for it to result in nobody being charged. And then see, have you forensic opportunities? You develop your media strategy, see if you maybe would do a witness appeal, look at maybe Crime Stoppers, see if you would decide with Crime Stoppers to offer a reward. That can actually be very beneficial, because you might have somebody who has vital information in relation to the case, but also they don't have the means that they would have had maybe years ago to live, and they don't have much money. So, you look at also the suspects. Where have they been? What have they been doing? Who have they been with? What's been happening in their lives? And then after you've reviewed all of that, you then compile what's called as a review report. You sit down with the current investigators and you tell them what your findings are. Sometimes one or two of the findings, they might say, well, we actually did that. Okay, well then you can revise it, but you don't revise your conclusions if you have found matters that weren't attended to. You make your recommendations, your suggestions as to how the case can proceed. Now, you give the recommendations back to the current investigators, and the senior investigating officer would have been appointed to it. And then what you have then is a watch and brief over the next 3 to 6 months. And you meet with the investigator and you see how they are progressing these recommendations. So that means they actually have to pay attention to it. You set timescales as well as best you can. Sometimes the timescales are exceeded, and that's an unfortunate fact of life. And then hopefully you get the case to court. You get a compelling file with the evidence into the DPP. It may necessitate sitting down with the DPP, going through exactly the file in minute detail, and then you're engaged with the family all along. It's constant engagement with the family. And then hopefully it does get to a court similar to Nancy Smith and Nora Sheen. And the family gets a guilty conviction.
You hope your case is strong enough.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. It's a long process, but certainly, given what we know, you would be hopeful that it is a case that would be taken on for a review, and I wish her well.
Yeah. I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.